Welcome to the critique. Today we're reviewing an FCC Public Notice, DA 25-1086, which effectively prohibits new equipment authorizations for foreign-made drones and their key components.
It's a major policy shift.
It is. And it seems like the central argument boils down to coupling national security directly with building a domestic industrial base.
Right. They're saying these foreign drones pose an unacceptable risk. Data exfiltration, surveillance, you know the drill. And the only real solution is to build our own.
That's the core of it. But before we get into the critiques, let's talk about what works. Where does this document actually succeed?
I think we have to start with its legal foundation. It's really solid.
Oh, absolutely. The articulation of legal authority is crystal clear. It doesn't just make a claim. It points directly to the Secure Networks Act and, more importantly, Section 1709 of the new NDAA.
That precision is vital. It basically tells you this isn't a suggestion, this is a mandate. And the definitions they use, they're also very buttoned up.
Right. They pull directly from the Code of Federal Regulations for what a UAS is, and then they list out the critical components.
Things like flight controllers, data links, even the batteries and motors.
Exactly. That specificity prevents a lot of wiggle room. It establishes a very clear legal perimeter, so from a structural standpoint, it's quite sound. It knows what it has the authority to do, and it defines what it's banning.
Agreed. The framework is solid, but a strong policy can still fail if the communication around it is flawed. And that, I think, is where we should start, with the justification.
Which brings us to our first major critique. It's all about the evidence, or the lack of it.
The reliance on blanket assertions of unacceptable risk related to data exfiltration undermines the document's persuasiveness with a skeptical public and industry.
Right, the national security determination part makes these huge claims that foreign governments can compel entities to provide real-time telemetry, imagery, and location data.
Or even disable the drones remotely. And that's the weakness. It cites CISA and other agencies, but it doesn't give a single, even generalized example of how that could happen.
So it's asking for a huge amount of trust.
A huge leap of faith. It's asking the public and the industry that has to bear the cost of this to just trust the conclusion of some interagency body without seeing any of the work.
But to be fair, what's the alternative? They can't just declassify intelligence reports, right? Isn't their job just to enforce the determination they were handed?
Their formal job is enforcement, yes, but their practical goal has to be effective policy adoption. And when you're silent on the mechanism of the risk, critics just immediately jump on it.
And call it protectionism?
Exactly. They say it's not about security, it's about trade. The public needs to understand on a technical level why a flight controller or a smart battery is a security risk, not just because of where it was made.
Okay, so the suggestion isn't to spill secrets, but to contextualize the threat in a more technical way, to use what you called strategic vagueness.
Precisely. You acknowledge the sensitivity, but you give people concrete risk scenarios so they can actually understand the problem. You have to show why those specific components are the vectors.
So give me an example. What could they have written in the document to do that?
Well, instead of just saying there's a risk, the FCC could have added language like, in documented cases of similar dual-use technology, unauthorized remote access has been leveraged through obscured update pathways embedded within key components such as the data transmission devices or flight controllers listed here.
I see. So that's specific.
It's specific enough. Or for another component, they could say, supply chain assessments have revealed that firmware embedded in specific battery management systems is capable of remote command execution independent of the airframe manufacturer's central operating system.
That simple change, it shifts the entire frame from a vague geopolitical warning to a tangible technical concern. That builds buy-in.
It really does. But technical buy-in is only half the battle.
Right. Which leads to the next major critique. Operational buy-in, because the document talks a lot about cartels, the Olympics, these high-level threats.
And almost nothing about the fire department down the street?
Exactly. That disconnect is where this policy could lose its most important allies, the people who actually use these things every day.
Which is our second critique. The document critically overlooks the massive operational and economic impact on U.S. stakeholders who rely on current foreign UAS fleets for public safety and commerce.
Yeah, the weakness here is just a total failure to acknowledge the immediate negative impact. We're talking first responders, infrastructure inspectors, small businesses, filmmakers.
And this is where the communication strategy really hurts itself. You have a fire department that relies on these drones to, say, assess a collapsed building, and the policy they're reading is only talking about World Cup security.
They feel completely ignored.
Totally disconnected. It makes the government look completely out of touch with their reality, and that creates friction. It makes compliance feel like a punishment, not a security upgrade.
It's so ironic, too, because this comes from the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. They're issuing a rule to enhance public safety that, in the short term, actively damages the operational capacity of public safety agencies.
It's a huge blind spot. So what's the suggestion? How do you fix that?
Well, the document needs a dedicated section that just acknowledges it. Acknowledges the reliance on this tech. It has to show some empathy for the transition challenges while still holding the line on the long-term goal.
So it's a tonal shift. It's about showing policymakers actually understand the pain points on the ground.
It is. Can you give me an example? What kind of language could they use to strike that balance? To acknowledge the problem without walking back the policy?
I think they could add a simple paragraph. Something like, the Commission and partner agencies recognize the immediate operational constraints this determination places on critical users, including public safety agencies, utility inspectors, and small commercial operators. We are committed to facilitating a responsible transition.
And then you have to give them an off-ramp.
You have to. And it's already in there. It's just buried. They need to clearly highlight that the carve-out clause, specific waivers from DHS or the Department of War, is the immediate, though narrow, path for necessary exemptions.
Right. So you give those users a clear directive, a next step, instead of just a brick wall. That's a huge communications win.
It is. And it leads right into our final critique. Because if you're going to ban something to create a domestic industry, you better show people the path to that new industry.
Otherwise, it just looks like you're trying to wall off the economy.
Precisely. Which brings us to number 3. The public notice is vulnerable to counter-arguments of protectionism because it issues a prohibition but fails to articulate clear, constructive transition pathways to the desired domestic industry.
Yeah, this is a big one. The weakness is that the whole justification, all the talk about unleashing American drone dominance, it's all about fostering a U.S. industrial base.
But the action itself is purely negative. It's just a ban, a prohibition. It offers no bridge, no resource connection to help all those affected users pivot to the very domestic alternatives the policy claims it wants to create.
It's a glaring policy gap. It's like you're telling someone to cross a river by blowing up the only bridge and just pointing to the other side.
That's a perfect analogy. And it allows critics to successfully frame this as a punitive tax on industry, not a strategic move to a secure future.
So what's the fix? I mean, the FCC can't just magically create a robust domestic drone industry overnight.
No, but they can show that the government as a whole is putting its money where its mouth is. The document has to proactively link this regulatory stick to a financial carrot.
And those carrots exist, they're just not highlighted.
They're buried in footnotes. So the suggestion is to add a section, call it Transition Support and Domestic Resources, and explicitly reference the FEMA and DHS grant programs.
So you're saying they should add text like what?
Like, entities seeking to transition to compliant technologies should consult the resources made available through the Counter Unmanned Aircraft Systems grant programs, and then go on to explain that these funds are designed to help with the adoption of trusted, secure UAS solutions.
And suddenly, it's not a regulatory hurdle anymore.
It's a strategic pivot point. You're showing industry that there's a financial bridge to get them across that river. That makes the policy infinitely more robust. It's not just an FCC action anymore, it's a coordinated national security strategy.
That makes sense. A much stronger communication strategy. So let's step back and look at the whole thing, the overall effectiveness. The goals here are what, twofold? Secure the network and maintain public confidence.
Right. And in my judgment, this document is highly effective at the first one. It absolutely achieves the goal of securing the telecommunications network. It stops the flow of new, risky equipment dead in its tracks.
Goal 1, check. But you're suggesting it's less effective on the confidence goal.
Much less effective. Because of all the weaknesses we just talked about. The vague warnings instead of clear technical risks, the total failure to acknowledge the operational reality for users like fire departments. It just guarantees pushback.
So the policy itself is strong.
The policy is legally sound and strong, but the way it's communicated almost ensures political friction and industry frustration. It's an enforcement mechanism that misses its chance to be a great piece of public policy communication.
So to recap for our listener, this critique really highlights 3 key areas for improvement. First, enhance that transparency with strategic, concrete examples of the technical risk.
Second, directly acknowledge the users on the ground, public safety, commercial operators, and give them a clear pathway for exemptions and support. Validate their concerns.
And third, bridge that gap between the ban and the goal of American dominance. You do that by directly referencing the grants and resources available, which neutralizes that protectionism argument.
If they make those changes, they turn what feels like a pure ban into a comprehensive and much more publicly defensible security strategy.
The challenge really is balancing those legitimate classified security concerns with the absolute need for public and industry buy-in.
It is. And we'd encourage the listener to integrate these suggestions and submit their revised policy communication back to us for another look.
That wraps up this critique on high-stakes policy communication for emerging aerial technology. For more expert breakdowns on the policies that affect aerial photography and technology, make sure to subscribe to Jolly Roger Aerial Photography. Your support helps us grow and deliver better content. If you found this review insightful, please like this video, comment with your thoughts below, and share it with your community.